Hi, this is Life with Coach Dom, and we're on another episode of Conversations for the Culture. Kingdom Edition. And today we have a special guest, Dr. Leah Angel Daniels.
Hi, how are you today? Thank you for having me.
How are you?
I am wonderful.
Okay, so I like to usually start the show with the guest, and we do a how I met you moment. And so just how do you remember us meeting?
I think you got in contact with me for a foster care alumni thing, or somebody introduced us. Suhiri introduced us.
I think, we were at it was like a women's event, and we were introduced, and then you told me about it was like a discussion. It was a discussion around foster care alumni. And I remember just being so like, foster care alumni, I've never heard of that. Like, what is that? It was such an interesting topic to me because I had shared with you that, I am someone who had been in foster care when I was younger. I was later adopted. And being introduced to you, I felt like I was opened up to this whole different world in view of viewing foster care. I never really thought of it as being an alumni. So where did that come from for you?
Well, I had a woman say to me one time, oh, you're a former foster care youth? And I was an adult. And I was like, no, I'm an adult. I'm a foster care alumni. So I felt like it was a part of my life, something that I had gone through, but it wasn't my full life. And I felt like it was something that I wouldn't probably say graduated from, but excelled from. And I wanted to use it in a positive way instead of a negative way. Because when people say, oh, you're a former foster care youth and you're an adult, and I'm like, listen, that's not the phrase I would like to use for myself.
Yeah.
Yes.
I never really thought about it like that. Like, someone still framing someone in the context of a youth as an adult, and just, mentally the message it also sends behind it too.
Right. And I felt like there was a lack of respect when it came to that. So for myself as a professional, having an advanced degree and still being in a space where someone is still calling me a youth,
Yeah. I never thought, even now, I feel like I'm still learning so much more. It was such a beautiful concept when we connected to hear it phrased in that way, because it definitely sounded more empowering than like this negative term. I think because I was in foster care for a shorter period of time, 5 years, and then I was adopted. I think in my mind, I kind of just closed that, like, oh, well, I got adopted. I think we've talked about before, a lot of people miss that, like, there are still things when you're adopted that you go through and you don't necessarily even have the support now because you're not in the system anymore, and the way that looks for people. And when I look back at my journey, I think it was one of the things I didn't really put a lot of thought into or think about the way that it shaped who I became down the line, and the way the Lord was able to use that just in my testimony and things like that. It was really eye-opening for me, and I definitely appreciated that in interacting with you. And so I wanted to ask you, what were your experiences with the foster care system and things like that, and how did that play a role into your like belief system?
Right. I'm glad you asked that, because that actually was my role in being who I am today, as far as with my belief system, and really, like, I wouldn't say challenging God, but like, listen, God, if you are real, then I need to see you make some moves for me in this situation. So I was in foster care for 10 years, from the age of 11 until 21. And as you stated, it teaches you things. There were some times that I felt like, why am I even in this situation? And at times I felt like being in foster care was worse than being in, with my permanent home, with my mom. But there was a woman who lived upstairs, from me before I was taken from my mom. And she invited us to Vacation Bible School. Okay. So I never knew what that was. My mother believed in God, but she talked about God, but we never went to church consistently. And it was a different type of lifestyle my mother lived. My mother was in the street, and meaning that she lived a life where It was a lot of street things happening in the house, you know? And so this woman upstairs knew that our mother was leaving us by ourselves. And that's why she decided to ask if we could go to Vacation Bible School. I went. There were kids there who were my age. I really enjoyed that. And then when we were taken from our mother, me and my sister, the people from the church would come pick us up and bring us to the activities at the church.
Okay.
So they knew we were in foster care. And so I was considered like the church's baby.
Okay.
And so for me, it was like getting away from my reality. So going to the church, not having to explain my situation, where my mother was, why I'm in foster care, all of the different questions that people continuously ask you when you're in care. And I didn't have to pretend that I was somebody that I wasn't. I didn't have to say, well, this woman is my grandmother or my aunt, instead of just saying, you know, this is my foster mom. Yeah. So the church for me, again, wherever I was, they came to pick me up to make sure that I was in church on Sunday. And then there were certain people who really shaped and molded who I was as an individual. Yeah. They mentored me. They loved on me. I would constantly say, I don't have my mother or my father. But when I think back now, in retrospect, I had many mothers and many fathers, you know, to be there at every point in my life to help me get across whatever I needed to get across, to help me celebrate whatever I needed to celebrate. Yeah. So I'm grateful for that. But as a child, when you don't have your biological parents, all you know is that the people who brought you into this world isn't there. Yeah. And you can't quite appreciate or understand sometimes the people and things that God puts in place because your brain is not fully developed yet. You don't really know. And again, you just know you have that yearning because biologically you're connected to your biological parents. Yeah. So those type of things. So that's what I was experiencing at that time. And I would say to God, if you are real, I need you to do A, B, C, and D. And I'm thinking back now, like, as an adult, like, who did I think I was? You know, trying to make him do something. But no, I needed to see something real and something tangible for myself because I had been so disappointed. Yeah. And to be young like that and no disappointment at that peak, that was a lot. It was a lot. And it really changed my perspective of the world, of my parents, of adults. And even in my 40s now, still struggling with some of those things. Yeah.
You know, I think people think that certain wounds just, you grow older and you get past them and they may not hurt, they may not be actively bleeding or, you know, doing something to you, but there is a part of grief that as we go into each phase of our life, we still grieve the things that we experienced before. I think even recently I was celebrating my birthday and I was just having a moment where I was happy about my birthday. I was happy about all the things that the Lord blessed me with. But at the same time, I had some moments where I was like, Lord, your word says that you're going to put the family list into families. Like, where is my family? Where is this? But I'm like, but I'm holding on to the promises of your word because I know that you're a God that you cannot lie. You know what I mean? I know you're not a liar. But so when you were saying about, you know, being younger and having this yearning because it is natural for us and things like that, I completely get that. I completely get that. And being in foster care and having that separation from your biological parents and learning things at such a young age where it's like you're learning, but at the same time, like you said, your brain isn't fully developed. So we're teaching ourselves things, or we're like creating dialogues with the limited amount of information that we have, right?
And the expectation is for us to know these things. So sometimes the comments would be, you're this age and you don't know this, not realizing that we hadn't been taught. And what I found is that on the outside looking in, when we look at certain families, we think that they're dysfunctional. But really, in real life, that's the way generationally they've been doing things for many, many years. So what other people may look at as dysfunction, we're like, oh no, this is how we do things, you know? And it's hard to unlearn, you know, a lot of different things. So for me, like being a caretaker, my entire life, I've been taking care of my siblings. I was taking care of my mom and doing all these things. And I was taught to put myself on the back burner. And so when people say, well, you should just be selfless and do all of this, not knowing that it is a full internal breakdown because you have to quiet that voice in the inside that says, okay, now you know you're supposed to be doing this for your siblings and this for your friends or whatever. And no, how do you put yourself first? And so spiritually thinking about that.
When it's that works mentality where when I don't think people realize when you're separated from your family at a young age, you're thrusted into other people's family, right? And I know for me, I had this like, I need to perform. Like I need to show that there's a reason that I should be here and all of these things like that. And the way that that carries into us. And I look back and I'm like, it's no surprise you got into all these serving professions. One, I do feel like it's definitely acts of service is definitely a spiritual gift.
Yeah.
I do think that being put in a space when you're really early on, where you're literally trying to serve out of trying to gain value, though, it takes the gift and kind of warps it a little. And you don't know how to turn it off because it says love our neighbor as we love ourselves. So yes, there is a certain part of us that's supposed to be selfless and we're supposed to put other people first and we're supposed to serve the community and help people. But if you are not taking care of yourself, you're missing half of it.
But your testimony starts at home, and home is us, ourselves. And I have realized lately, I say, just as good as I am to other people, I'm going to be just as good to myself. And so putting myself first, even in other contexts, like they say, you got to pay yourself before you pay anybody else. You have to focus on yourself. And what does that look like? And it's different for everybody else. And so for me, right now, it means not answering the phone every time somebody calls, not going to every event when I know that I am exhausted. I have children now, my own children. I've raised my siblings. I've helped other family members with their kids. So now it's time I have to put my children first, so those type of things. And people are not understanding because they're used to me showing up and being everything to them and really nothing to myself. And I had to change that, especially after, I ended up getting in a car accident and all these different things happening. And I'm like, well, where's all the people I helped?
Okay.
And so just thinking of that. So even in the context of people knowing how I grew up in foster care, knowing the responsibilities that I had, and then in a professional realm, people know I am trustworthy, dedicated, dependable, all of those different things. And it works in your favor sometimes, but in other times, people know that you're going to do what you need to do, but it doesn't always equate to them doing what they need to do for you in order for you to feel supported, stay in those positions, and really to be replenished, because we need to be replenished too. And so those type of things. And then that's where it goes into the people pleasing. Am I doing right for other people? All of those different things that people not understanding, the things that you have to break, and how being in a systemic environment such as foster care has procreated these thoughts in your mind that you have to do better and be better and always push for it and always show that you are doing your best and being your best. Well, sometimes you got to turn that off because you need to rest.
I think it's like that thing in the back of your mind where it's like, I don't want to be a statistic.
All the time.
Already feeling like being a statistic because you were in the system. And so feeling this like immense pressure to fight against it and to show up and I have to do. It's similar to you. I feel like that car accident just broke something because now I wasn't as able-bodied as I was before. But I'm still the same. I'm still, dependable. But now I had to sit with like, I need people. And I need a certain type of people.
Yes.
And I had to start looking at, do I have a certain type of people or have I just been that certain type of people to everybody else? Like, what do these relationships around me, professional, personal, even with my kids, like, in what ways have I cultivated a space where it's like, Dom will get it done, Dom will do it, and she doesn't really need a lot of help. She's got it.
Yes, and I am with you. I overstand. In 2021, my mom passed away, and the expectation was for me to do everything. And I did it because I knew that was my responsibility as far as where I knew my mom didn't have anybody else to do it. And I remember her making a comment one time. She was like, oh, yeah, don't worry about it. Leah's going to handle it. Anything happens to me. So people they know I'm dependable, but I looked at my Rolodex and said, listen, who do I have? Who can I say that I can list them as an emergency contact because their number will be the same? Who can I depend on that I know they're going to do right by me? And when my mom passed, it was so many things that flooded my mind. My spirit was broken because I would tell her, as long as you have breath, God is able. And we have to realize when sometimes people's spirits are broken, sometimes they can't retrieve it. And she just kept saying, I don't know how to get my life back. I feel like it's so far gone. And she said, when my kids were taken, that was it for me. And in my mind, my mom never really tried to get us back because she was so used to things coming to her easy, and the system wasn't easy to, you know how it is to get the kids, like these menus that don't make sense and things like that. And it was something that, was held over her head. And so when she passed, I went through so many emotions. Yeah. I was drained. I was like a robot getting things done. And then once everything was done and over with, it was me with the thoughts and like, I wish my mom could have gotten her life together. Yeah. I had so many thoughts about how she could have, or could I have done better? Mm-hmm. What could I have helped her with? And it was like she had her free will. She was going to do what she needed to do. But I remember a family member saying one day, because I was so exhausted, and she said, oh, just take the weekend. You'll be fine. You're strong. You're resilient. Mm. And I was having anxiety attacks. Yeah. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. So many things were happening. I ended up getting stress-induced diabetes because of the weight of everything on me. So many things were happening at one time. I had a very stressful and demanding job. You really only get 3 days for bereavement. You can't even plan a funeral in that amount of time. I had my siblings who were all depending on me. I had to financially pay for everything. My mom passed in a whole nother state where I had to go down there, down south, get her body back to Buffalo, all of the different things that came with that. And I didn't know funerals were expensive as they were to, just be with everything. And then we had another family member that passed the day after my mom. So it was a lot. And I don't think people truly understood what I was going through. And them being so dismissive of my feelings made me so angry and resentful. And I was like, I'm done. Like, I don't want to deal with anybody, because if they can't even take the time to sit and be a human being and say, you know what, Leah has done a lot. Let me take something to eat over to her house for her children. Yeah. Let me help her. Let me sit there with her. Let me pray with her. Let me just be there. Let me hug her.
The power
and
of
all
presence.
Of that was gone.
Yeah, people don't think about the power of presence, that people don't need you to fix anything. Mm-hmm. They don't need you to necessarily even say anything, but just sometimes having your presence there so someone knows that, like, you see, you care, you can't fix it. Mm-hmm. Like, I can go to God, for answers and things like that, and for him to console me, but you as another person at least understand that I need comfort and presence right now.
And then they had the nerve to still ask for things. Yeah. So and I had to understand. I started going back to therapy at that time. And even with that, I was like, okay, I thought I had overcame a lot of different things, but now I had triggers that I used to have when I was in foster care, and feelings about with my dad. And I'm like, oh, well, he's going to step up more now that my mom is gone. And that was not the case. So having to deal with that. And, being, again, in the position to be the mother figure to my siblings, because now our mother is gone, So those type of things. And I had to really unravel a lot of things. And I had to really think about what made sense to me didn't make sense to other people. And that was okay. But I had to deal with my own internal wounds and feelings, not just from foster care, but the abandonment and disappointment and neglect from my parents.
Yeah. What did that look like, having that conversation with the Lord?
It was ugly. It was ugly. I've never been the type of person that says, why me? Mm-hmm. But I was angry that people didn't see me for who I was and everything that I had gone through, that I was deserving of something soft. Mm-hmm. That's what I was angry about, that people didn't think of me as an individual the way that I thought of them. Mm-hmm. And I would say, Lord, give me the strength. I would go through my house saying it. My younger daughter would repeat after me as that's all I could get out was, Lord, give me the strength. Yeah. Because I just didn't want to be in a situation where I had to depend on people who I knew didn't have the toolkits to help me to get out where I needed to go, or just who didn't want to see me being favored, and dealing with those realities. And the fact that people that I thought were my friends were not my friends. They were only, the value of the relationship was only what I could do for them. Yeah. And so those hard truths, it was like the mask was ripped off of my face when my mom passed. Mm-hmm. And it was too much at one time for me. Mm-hmm. And it was ugly. Yeah. So I had those hard cries. really diving into the word and just really thinking about, okay, what does this one scripture mean? Reaching out to my mentors, reaching out to my spiritual mothers and just saying, I need your help because I'm in a spiritual warfare right now.
Yeah.
And there was one book that my pastor gave me when I was in college, and I had to revisit it. It says, "Don't die in the winter. Your season is coming." And talking about just different areas of life that it won't always be like this. Yeah. And so that's how you keep your mind strong and thinking about that and how God will see you through. Not that we're exempt from anything that happens in life.
Yeah, no, the Bible talks about how there will be suffering. Right. I think people, kind of miss that part. Obviously, it's not necessarily what we want to experience, but it's not like the Lord didn't put it in there to make sure that we had something to look back to, like, okay, this isn't too off track because it did say we was going to suffer, but Lord, this is heavy. Yeah. I think another concept of, even when you said, like, Lord, give me the strength, and it just felt like it was too much at one time to handle, just that concept that sometimes people are like, well, a lot of people, with the song or whatever, the Lord won't give you more than you can bear. But the reality is the Lord will give us individually more than we can bear because he's trying to build our reliance on him. If we could handle everything on our own, we wouldn't turn to him.
Right. And when you're a type A personality, for me, it wasn't that I didn't want to relinquish. It was like, how do I do that? How do I allow God to just take it off? How do I become carefree and just say, Lord, I know you're going to, what does that look like? And I needed somebody to walk me through that.
How do I learn how to do that? Right. Especially coming from a space of going through foster care, dealing with abandonment, and dealing with like that having to grow up and be kind of parentified so young for survival. I realized myself just how difficult it really was to relinquish at times because I didn't necessarily even know that that's what I should be doing. Right. But then once I realized, like, oh, this is what I should be doing, it's like, oh, Lord, I need you to help me to relinquish because life and things I'm dealing with in the physical have kind of convinced me and told me that I had to show up this way.
And again, not having that concrete support. When I look at other people, say, for instance, you lose your job or you got to move out of your apartment and they have parents they can go live with. They can call mom or dad and ask for, money and different things like that. Not having that type of support, for me, it causes a form of anxiety. It's like, listen, I'm all I have. And then the anxiety of coming with asking people, because if you ask the wrong people, they won't help you, but they'll talk about you. They'll shame you. And so those type of things. So dealing with those emotions, but when you know who you are and whose you are, those things can no longer bother you. And either they're going to help or they're not. And none of us can do it alone. Even with as far as I've gotten there because people have assisted me and helped me along the way. And I had to think of all the different ways. And I remember my mother used to say, if you don't ask, nobody can help. And it's either going to be a yes or no. And if they say no, then go to somebody else who can.
Okay. I love that. It was a thread recently and it was like, Black female therapists, what's your one piece of advice you could give to other Black women? And my advice was like, people are not mind readers and we can't assume. So tell people what you need and then let them decide if they can do it or not. And then you decide how you want to move forward. I think that's, and it's kind of like what you said earlier, where it's like, people think you should know this. No, this is a concept of like, we have to tell people because people don't know it. They don't know, okay, I should just ask for help. I should just ask for assistance. But when you've been in a situation where that wasn't like a thing, you've learned to just not ask and to just keep on chugging. So I definitely get what you're, saying with that. And also, going through foster care and things like that, feeling like you have to have all the answers, you got to figure it out, being anxious because you don't have the family to depend on. There were so many times where I'm like, I wish I had. Listen. I wish I was like, you know what? Life is crazy. Stuff is a little too expensive. I ain't got nowhere to go. Let me go with my family. Let me call a family member instead of being one that people call. I'm like, I didn't have that. And I was raised in a space where I had other, siblings who may have been a little higher needs in some areas. And I just had to figure it out.
Same.
And so I just grew up that way. And I'm thankful to the Lord in the ways that he's worked with me in sitting me down. Honestly, I feel like the car accident and other things sat me down. And I had to sit with, okay, God, like, you are in charge. I can rely on you. And I have to put my trust in you. I don't know what's going on, but you do, and that is gonna have to be enough sometimes. And I had to, like you said, I had to start saying no to a lot of stuff. I can't come to every event. I can't, like, I support you, spiritually, all of that stuff. Sending my congratulations, but I can't be at every event like I used to. I can't be in all of these spaces because the Lord is doing a thing and he's healing places in me that were like wounded long ago. And I need to sit down and I need to rest to do that.
Right.
Like creating the space to say, I really do have to sit down. And if you really love me, you're going to be understanding of that.
Right.
It's not going to be see, I knew she didn't. It's not going to be that. It's going to be, this is what Dom needs. She was there for what we needed, but this is what Dom needs. And it sounds like that's what you're saying. You had to get to the place to say, like, Leah needs stuff at this point, and I have to prioritize that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it wasn't an easy route or path to get through because I had to deal with my own emotions. And that's what I was talking about, just getting those internal voices in check and, healing that wounded child, because that wounded child would be like, hey, I'm over here. I'm going to do everything people ask me because they'll love me and like me better and all these things. And it's unnecessary. It doesn't have to be done that way. And people are going to love you and support you and do the things that need to be done. And it should be reciprocal, not transactional, to where you're just doing everything and no one supports you, when it matters and things like that.
Yeah. And also knowing that some people won't.
And it's
that's okay. I think that was the biggest thing. It's like, you don't have to show up and work for people to do it. There could be some people, I could be hanging from the chandelier. I could be doing backflips, baby. And it's never going to be enough for that person. But now my back hurt. I'm limping, because I was hanging from the chandelier. Right. So it's like I had to learn, like, Dom, you don't have to do, stunts and tricks and gymnastics. It has to be enough of you just being you. And sometimes that you is going to need to take a break.
And be willing to deal with those misunderstandings. I tell people all the time, I am very transparent with my friends. They know how I grew up, where I come from. But at the same token, there are sometimes I just need to be in a space by myself and for that season. And it's not personal, but I'm overstimulated and I need the quiet, and I explain that to them. So I just feel like those who want to understand will, those who don't, that's on them.
Yeah, I feel like it's a balance in it all. Like there are some seasons and periods of time where we really do have to turn inward and things like that because we just might not have capacity. But I think also what I hear is it's not saying you're no longer in community, that you're no longer friends with the people, that you're no longer like supportive in the ways that you have. But just sometimes you do have to hone in and focus on the things that you need to keep going.
Yes, and this is that season.
Yeah.
Yep. And so that's where I'm at today, and I'm happy. I feel better, and I'm growing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you think about those feelings of, like you talked about things you learned and like the inner dialogues of abandonment and things like that, how has the Lord helped you reconcile that?
I used to think it was like cliche when people would say, oh, well, you got to forgive people because it really helps you more than it helps them. And as a child, I was angry with my mom for just not trying to get us back, for us being in certain situations while we were in foster care. And when I became an adult and I was in college and I was doing a lot of classes on psychology and really learning about systems and people's genealogy. And I asked my mom, and trauma-focused care, you know, when they talk about the different things, it's not what did you do, but what happened to you. And so as I began to understand my lineage and how my family members grew up, how my mom grew up, how she wasn't protected, and a lot of times the things that happen to your parents trickles down and they raise you the way they were raised because nobody taught them different. And that's what I saw was happening. Yeah. And my mother would say to me, she said, you're going to break the generational curse. I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know how that would feel. I didn't even know that this huge task was placed upon me. But also I remember the investment and the value of older people in my family. So when I was born, I was the first baby in a long time. And I was there to meet my great-great-grandmother and my great-grandmother and my great-grandfather. So I had all of these older people who sold into me, who loved on me, who instilled certain things in me. And holding on to those things. And so for me, again, thinking about my mom's life, I felt that empathy for her.
Yeah.
And I was like, nobody gave her the toolkit to do different or be different. So as I began to learn things, I began to talk to her about the things that I was learning about.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do different and be different. When I was in college, I would bring my cousins and my siblings up to the college. And I was like, it's not just about the education, but about the community. Mm-hmm. My friends are my family. I show them how you build relationships with people, about the social clubs and the different things, and how you could change your own narrative for your own life. You don't have to do the things or be the things that your family members are. Yeah. And it's not that I'm shaming them. It's just I saw what the end was. Yeah. So either being on drugs, being in a form of prostitution, or being a professional booster, and all these different things that lead to prison, or, you know, having all of these children, not knowing who the children's fathers are, and all. I didn't want that. That was drama. And I saw how it wore on people. And I'm like, why continue to do things when you have the living examples here of how it turns out? I don't want that. And so for me, education was the way. One thing my mother did instill in me was education, and I went with it, and it helped me. It fed me. It helped me to thrive. And so for me there, learning about her life and saying, I can't even hold this up. She did it so I didn't have to. She went through a lot of those traumas so I didn't have to. Yeah. And so what am I going to take from this? I had to look at it as a lesson and a blessing. Yeah. Not that I'm going to make perfect decisions all the time. Life happens. We're all going to go through life. But again, looking at her decisions and what she went through and telling her, I told her one day, I said, before she passed, we were just talking, and somebody said to her, you should be very proud of your daughter because all the things she did. And I was kind of offended with what she said. She was like, oh, she's only doing what I should have done. And then I said, Lord, let me redirect myself. I said, Mom, you are successful because I am part of you. And I'm that other part of you that's thriving that you didn't get to do, but I'm doing it in the spiritual for you. And she was like, okay, like, you know.
I love that. Because as you were talking, I just kept hearing, like, the Lord was able to reconcile through softening your heart.
Yes.
Him softening your heart from how you felt when you were younger and the resentment you had, him softening your heart. And then that allowed you to look at your mom through different eyes. And it allowed you to look at your family through different eyes. And then it allowed you to go back and to value things like wisdom and discernment and impart them into your family.
And my mother suffered from mental health. So that education behind schizophrenia, you know, all those different things. And when I was writing a book about my foster care experience, and then I pivoted a little bit, I wrote about my mother in there and our relationship and my perspective of becoming a mother and the anxieties I had, but also the things that I wanted to have that I felt like my mother didn't give me, but I wanted to give to my children. Yeah. And so when some of the family members read the book, I mean, my great aunts were calling, they were crying. They was like, I never thought about it like this. They was like, this was a beautiful written piece about your mom. And I just don't think that people ever looked at her through that light or thought about her life before she, you know, got hooked on drugs and things like that. And they were in shock, and it was like, this is beautiful. So having that tribute to her, that people not only think about, you know, her wild times, because she was feisty, but also the times what she did contribute, her good heart, the life she wanted to live, her desire, but unfortunately due to being in the streets and those different things, because the streets, they never lost anybody. They take everybody down that, you know, they try to get a hold of.
They try to get a hold of everybody.
But the reality that none of us are exempt.
Nobody. Even for us who feel like we got out, there are still ways that it has touched our lives. Yeah. I love what you said about the book. So I wrote a book, a poetry book. It's called Complex Trauma, Poetic Experiences of a Little Black Girl. And I read one of the poems at that event that you had that's in the book. Now, the very opening poem I wrote when I was pretty young, and it's a little harsh. Some people would probably feel like it's a little harsh and it's a little raw about my perceptions as a kid about my mom and her choices that she made as far as, you know, drug use and me being in the system and things like that. And as I prepared to publish the book, I, you know, being in the place that I am now with the Lord, I was like, oh, Lord, I don't know, because this isn't the heart posture that I have now, right? I know way differently than the places and spaces that I was in this book. However, I did move forward with publishing it because I felt like it spoke to the rawness of the journey. Like it spoke to the rawness of what it's like growing up in foster care and all the different touch points that it has in our life, but also still coming together in the end of the way the Lord can use that. Because I feel very differently about my mom now than I did when I was a kid, and I felt abandoned and I felt, all these things. As I went to school and learned different things like that, I started to have a different perspective as well, and looking at her more through the lens of like, there are probably things that happened as well. And we've had some of those conversations, and we've, worked on rebuilding, but it took the Lord kind of re-softening my heart, for me to be able to do that.
Yes.
Is there any last things you want to say before we close?
I just want to say that we are all a work in progress. And what allowed me to really to love on my mom even more, I had to set strong boundaries because she still lived the way she wanted to live. And like I said, my mom passed in 2021. And I remember 2 days before she passed, which her passing was unexpected, she said to me, I just want to tell you that I'm so proud of you. And I just want to thank you for always respecting me as your mother, regardless of whatever I went through. And that meant a lot to me because I wanted her to know that I appreciated her for being the vessel for me coming through for this life that I have now, and that I am who I am because she did provide value to the life that I have. And I just want people to understand that we don't have to condone, what our parents have done or even the people who are caretakers, but take what you can take from the experience, move on, do what you can, and remembering that you have the power to do what you need to do to change the narrative and the trajectory of your life. Not that it's going to be perfect, not that it's going to be easy. I tell people I'm 20 plus years removed from foster care, but I still have some of those same feelings of when I was there. It is not easy not having parents, especially now that I have children. So I just want people to understand that life goes on, but we got to make the best of the life that we do have, and that those moments in time when we grew up and how we grew up, that doesn't overshadow your whole entire life.
It doesn't.
And so for me, I'm living, I have lived, I travel, I do extraordinary things, and I experience life too. I have days that I'm down. I have days that I'm like, what the heck am I doing? Okay. But it is normal. And that people don't teach us that it is normal. Life's for everybody. Regardless of what socioeconomic background you come from, what your racial or ethnicity status is. We all go through life, and it's up to us to just make sure that we're making the best of what we have, whether we come from foster care or not.
Yeah, no matter where we come from. I love that. And I think also speaking to forgiveness a lot, it helps you to move on. It really is for you, and it's such a freeing thing, and it allows us to move forward and continue to progress. So thank you so much for coming and just sharing your story, and just time with me. I appreciate it so much. Thank you guys for joining another episode of Conversations for the Culture with Life with Coach Dom.